Hello and welcome back to this video series where I'm programming this robot from scratch. In this video I'm going to improve on the handling of my test functions, the functions that I add throughout the development of this project to test isolated parts of the code. For example, so far I've added two functions to test IO pins as input and output, as well as a function to test the assert handler, which I added in the last video. These functions are not proper unit tests, and I've decided to not write any unit tests in this project. But I still like to have a way to write these kinds of scratch functions during development. But the way I've handled these functions so far have not been very nice, because right now I add them straight to my main file, and when I want to run a particular test function I have to hand edit the file by commenting out the function I want to run and comment the rest of functions that I'm not running, which means I have to keep on editing the main file each time I want to run another test. And in this video I want to improve on this by moving the test functions to a separate file, and also make it so that I can pass the name of the test function as an argument to my build command instead, so as an argument to make. And I'm also going to add an additional step to my CS system to make sure that my CS system builds all of these test functions each time it runs. So let's get into the code. As always, I begin by creating a new local Git branch. And then I'm just going to move the functions from the main file to the test file, test.c, under source/test. And also clean up what's inside my main function here. And add an assert at the end. Then I can just go ahead and remove the to-dos above all of these functions and make sure that all of the functions are uncommented. And then I'm actually going to add another main function inside this test file, because while I build the tests I'm going to use this test file as my main file and exclude my normal main.c file. And then when I do a normal build I will be using the regular main file and exclude this test file. And I'm going to select between these two files inside my make file. And then inside this main function I will use a define that takes the name of the test function. So this define here called test, all uppercase, will be replaced by the name of the function. And I'm going to set this define by passing a define argument to my compiler. And then I will just have an assert here after this function has been called, just so that I don't exit out of the main function. Not that it really matters, but it's just going to be more visible that the test has finished if I have an assert here. And then I'm just going to remove the test.h file here that I added in a previous commit, because I'm just going to need the C file. Then I can go into the make file, and similar to how I added the hardware argument, I can now add the test argument. So first I check if the test argument has been passed by checking if the test variable is not empty. And then I'm going to have an additional check here to make sure that what's passed inside the test variable actually begins with the prefix test underscore, since all of the test function is going to be prefixed with test underscore. And if it's not, I will just post an error here, because then I have made a typo. So just an extra check to make it more user friendly. And if what I passed begins with test underscore, I'm going to assume that it's a test function and set the variable target name. I'm also making another change here, because right now, depending on which target I'm building for, I'm going to end up with a different binary named according to the hardware target. So if I build for the launchpad, it's going to end up under build/launchpad, and if I build for Ensumo, the robot, it's going to end up under build/Ensumo. And if I build a test, I want to name the binary according to the test function name instead. So I'm going to introduce another variable for the hardware target called target underscore HW. And just as before, I'm going to set the target name to target hardware. But if I've also passed a test argument, I'm going to overwrite the target name with the test function name instead. And then for my final target variable, I changed this to be buildir/bin/target hardware/target name, which means that under the build directory I'm going to end up with a subdirectory called bin, and inside bin I will have two subdirectories, one for each hardware target, and then under these two subdirectories I will have the name of the final binaries, which is going to be the name of the test functions, and then just as before the name of the hardware for the normal build. And as I said before, I'm adding a way here to switch between the two different main functions that I have now. So the main function is inside test.c and the main function inside the normal main.c. So if I pass a test function or want to build a test function, I'm going to build using the test.c file. And if it's a normal build, I'm going to build with the normal main.c file. And then under the defines, I add another variable for the test define. And I add this in the same way as the hardware define. And then I test to see that it works by passing one of the test functions, test blink LED. But here I get a compiler because I don't actually pass the test define in the right way. I actually have to write it like this because I am setting the define to a value and I'm not just simply defining it as I do for the hardware define. So that resolved the first issue, but I'm still getting compile warnings or compile errors here because it sees that I have a bunch of functions that are defined but not used. And that's true because I'm just building and running one of these functions at a time. To get away with these warnings, I need a way to mark these particular functions as unused, similar to how I mark variables as unused. So what I'm going to do here is add another define so that I can mark specific functions as unused. Because I don't want to turn off this compiler in general, because normally I shouldn't have any unused functions inside my code. So I add another define called suppress unused, and use a preprocessor directive for the GCC compiler to mark functions as unused. And then I can just put this above all of the functions that I want to suppress this warning for. Essentially all of the functions inside test.c. And if I build this again, it works. And then I can try to build another function. And as you can see, the different test functions end up as separate binaries inside my build directory. And I can also try to pass a function that doesn't begin with test underscore and see that I get the error. But now I actually notice an issue here. I can build a function that doesn't exist. And that's because I'm just changing the argument to make when building another test function, which means that make is just going to use the already built object files and not going to rebuild test.c, which would cause the compiler error. So it actually just keeps on rebuilding the same test as I built the first time, regardless of which test I pass to it. And I didn't come up with a nice way to solve this, so instead I solve it in a more abusive way by removing the test object file each time I run make. So now each time I build a test, it's going to rebuild test.c, so I will get a compiler error if I pass a test function that doesn't exist. Then I can go over to my GitHub configuration file to add another step to my CI system that builds all of the test functions. But I don't want to add a separate line for each test function. So what I'm going to do instead is add a script that builds all of the test functions that I can call from here instead. So I'm adding this script under tools and I'm calling it build_tests, a regular bash script. And inside this bash script, I'm first going to run cat, or I'm going to read test.c, and then I'm going to grep and use regexp to extract the name of all of the test functions. So inside the regular expression here, I'm first matching the beginning of the function. It's always going to begin by void space, and then test underscore. And then I extract the functions all the way until I see parentheses. So I'm matching against this part and just extracting the function name like this. And then inside the bash script I can just have a for loop that loops over all of the function names. First I have a variable to hold the location of the script so that I can run this script from anywhere. And then I put the output from the regexp command into a separate variable called test functions. And then I loop over the output of this command in a for loop and build each test for both targets. And I also have to make the script executable. And then I run the script, but it doesn't work because I made a typo. But if I fix this typo, it builds all of the test functions. And I can see that it built all of them by looking inside my build directory. And all of these tests have different sizes, which means they are different. And then I can just go ahead and call this script from my CI system. At this point I was done with my code changes, so I format the code, run static analysis, add the files to Git, and create a commit. Then I push it to GitHub and open a pull request and wait for the CI to run. But CI failed because I accidentally included make inside my command here, so I have to remove make. And then I just amend my existing commit and force push it to the same pull request. This time CI passed, and I can go in and check the logs to see that it actually built all of the tests, and it looks like it did. So then I merge my pull request. Okay, so now I have a good way, or well, I have a way to handle these test functions or scratch functions. I'm not entirely satisfied with what I ended up with here, but I think it's going to get the job done for this project. But what I've done here, you shouldn't see as any best or good practices. It's just a way of doing things. So see you in the next video.